Before I jump into the book itself, I just need to talk about how far above and beyond the marketing team at Viper Press went with this book. They sent me a beautiful box with the book inside and a small bottle of red wine and a sealed envelope addressed to me. And I've still got the seal, it looks like a clock face. In the envelope was an invitation to a murder mystery event in London, which I couldn't attend. And that included a leaflet all about the book. Inside this is a map of the house, because it's a murder mystery. And on the back it says, "You are cordially invited to a murder." Then we have a fake train ticket from King's Cross to Basilhow, the place where the book takes place. And these beautiful cards. On the back is the Viper Press logo. On the front of this one is the character from the book that I would play in the murder mystery. And on this one is room for me to write down who I think the killer is. Viper Press has the best marketing team in publishing right now. They're amazing. Now on to the book. This is Helle Death by Oscar Jensen. It is an homage to or a return to the classic golden age of cozy murder mystery novels. In its vibes, in its style, in its setup, in its execution, in its tone, in its characters, in its setting, this is an Agatha Christie-esque murder mystery novel. And it is beautiful. Helle Death is set in the modern day, and it focuses around 8 friends, or I guess kind of former friends. They all went to Oxford together about 10 years ago, and now they're in their early 30s. Each of them is doing something different, and they all reconvene in this huge country manor that is now owned by one of them. The one who owns it is called Anthony Dodd. When these 8 people were all at uni together, he had an idea for an app. He took that idea and he ran with it, and it made him his fortune very, very early in his life. He worked on the app for a long time. It's become kind of a household name. It works as an item tracker to find lost things. He sold it, he retired early, he bought this beautiful country manor, and now he lives in it. And he's invited these 7 former friends of his to a kind of reunion, so they can all meet up and catch up about their lives so far. They receive their invites and off they go. The story begins with the protagonist of the group, although there are multiple points of view throughout the novel, but the titular Torben Helle is certainly our protagonist. He's originally from a small town in Denmark, he moved to the UK for university, and he never left. Now he works as an art historian. We meet him at the beginning on the train, and then soon enough we're at the house and we start to meet all the other characters, and it moves at a decent click. Not too quickly, but not too slowly either. Because the thing about Agatha Christie books, and books of that ilk, is that they have to get their pacing just right. You have to know your characters, get to know all the names, get to know their jobs and maybe a simple sentence about their personality, and then we move on, because ultimately these people are puzzle pieces. We need to be able to distinguish them as individuals, but we never know them that well because we don't need to. This novel pushes a little bit further into more intimate territory. We do get to know these characters better than that. It's a bit more of a drama. It's still a golden age style murder mystery, but Oscar Jensen clearly wants you to know these people and connect with them a little bit deeper. Which is why this isn't a sleuth walking into a crime and trying to solve it as if he's solving a puzzle, but rather a member of this group of friends. They all know each other. They've all been friends. However close they are now, they still know each other very well. And so Jensen wants you to get to know them. So the pace is a little bit slower than your typical Honkaku Japanese murder mystery or any golden age style murder mystery novel. That said, as I said at the beginning, it still carries those vibes, that tone, the whole setup, everything. Torben Helle arrives at the house and the reunion begins. Now the blurb says that they all have dinner together and Anthony Dodd, the owner of the house, drops some bombshell on everyone. Some enormous revelation. And then the blurb goes on to say that eventually there is a death that needs to be solved. In order to fully talk about the novel, I'm going to give away what the bombshell is and who the death is. If you don't want to know those things, I understand. Stop watching. Just know that if you're a fan of Agatha Christie and crime novels in general, you're going to enjoy this. It is absolutely worth your time. If you're okay with knowing the full setup, I want to talk about it so that I can talk a little bit more freely about the novel itself. You've been warned. So the blurb is right, they all sit around at the table. And Anthony Dodd reveals to everyone that he is dying. He has some very rare disease that is going to kill him anywhere between 3 months and 3 years from now. He believes he might have contracted this illness from radiation, from working with cell phones for so many years. And that's why he bans cell phones from the house, which is just a perfect setup. It's set in the modern day, there's modern technology everywhere, but no, not in this house. No one has their phone. Their phones are locked away. Perfect. Very good way of setting that up, of removing the technology, of purifying the space. He then says that he's written his will and every person in this room is going to get £50,000. And as they go into later in the book, £50,000 is such a specific amount of money. Because depending on your lot in life, depending on your situation, your class, your status, £50,000 is either a phenomenal, very useful, life-saving amount of money that could change your entire life, that could give you so much opportunity, so much comfort, or it's pittance. £50,000 to some people is pocket change. And some of those people include Anthony Dodd himself. And so it's such a curious number. And again, they talk about this later in the book. £50,000. This is a group of people who all have different circumstances, different backgrounds. They all went to Oxford. They're all doing different things. Some of them come from wealthy backgrounds. Some of them very much don't. Some of them are poor immigrants. Some of them are from old money. So to some, 50 grand is everything. And to others, it's almost nothing. Then they go to bed. And there's a brilliant moment that I actually want to read out to you. It really made me laugh. They've all drunk themselves into oblivion because this is really sad news and they're drowning their sorrows. Torben goes to bed and he wakes up with an enormous hangover. And chapter 5 ends with this. And now it was morning, light like snow. His world was glass, brittle thin. If he moved, his head would shatter. They might at least stop screaming. What kind of person screams, he's dead, over and over like that when someone in the next room has a hangover? Rude. That really made me laugh. Really enjoyed that. Brilliant setup. So we know Dodd is dying, we know about the will, but the next morning, Torben wakes up, and the person who's dead is Anthony Dodd, the person who was already dying. But what's curious is that this was suicide. His body is on his bed, he clearly shot himself, and he left a note. Looks like suicide to me, but is it? Torben doesn't think so. And so the fingers start to be pointed, the investigation begins. The slightly weird thing about this book is that there is no professional detective, there is no sleuth. But one of them, Ruth, is a cop. And yet, Torben decides to kind of take the reins here with this investigation. Torben believes that this was murder, and he starts to list off the reasons why. For example, the gun is in his right hand, he clearly used his right hand to shoot himself, but Torben knows that Anthony was left-handed. Also, he shot himself in the middle of his forehead, which is not a natural way to do it. It is not instinctive to do that. And then they check the suicide note and it looks like a forgery. Some of the writing doesn't quite add up. And there are no fingerprints on the gun, at all, including Dodd's. He puts all these things together and he declares that this was clearly a murder made to look like a suicide. But who did it? And yeah, that's all fun detective work. But why does Torben take the reins here and have Ruth basically be the Watson to his Sherlock when she's a cop? I didn't get it then, but it did spark a thought in my mind. Did Torben do it? Even though we watched him go to bed and we watched him wake up, this could be a Roger Ackroyd situation. We can't trust that he didn't do it, and the fact that he's so eager to take the reins on the investigation and push the cop to the side makes you think he did it, and he's trying to lead the investigation. And then I thought, well, maybe Ruth did it. Because she's a cop, she would know how to do this kind of thing. I don't like cops, so I kind of wanted her to be the one who did it. And maybe by being the sidekick in the investigation, she'd be able to lead certain witnesses, move evidence around, but do it slightly from the shadows, still looking like she's in charge, but not quite. So your cogs start turning, as they should with any good murder mystery story. Who did it? Why? And obviously I'm not going to talk about any of the details with regards to any twists going forward beyond who died. Another great element to this book is the fact that it's snowing. They are locked in this house. They cannot escape. It is a rural setting. The snow is thick. There is nobody else for miles around. They are trapped here. They have no phones. They have no signal. They have no technology really at all. And so for the second and third acts of this very rigidly structured novel, we just have these people. Just them. Just the conversations between them, the interrogations, the suspicions, the conversations. And as I said before, Jensen really wants you to get to know these people. And so it isn't just an investigation, but there are also conversations between them where they reminisce about their university days and they tell each other what they've been up to since. You get a very clear and vivid image of who these people are, what their jobs are, what their lot in life is, where they're living, who they're living with, if they're married with kids, if they're not. You get it all. And so in that sense, this feels like a murder mystery and also a pretty satisfying character drama as well. And you have a satisfyingly diverse cast as well. Ruth, the cop that I mentioned before, is a black woman from London. Helle himself is from rural Denmark. There's another girl who grew up in Iraq, a lad from Hong Kong who's been struggling to make it as an actor for the past 10 years. It's a really satisfyingly diverse cast of people. Although not entirely, because there is no hint of queerness here at all, which was a bit of a shame. The downside, however, for me was the aforementioned pacing. It starts off really, really strong, moving almost as quickly as a Christie book does, but it's a little bit longer than a typical Christie. And as I said, it rewards its reader by adding a bit of detail about the characters and making you care more about them and feel more invested in their lives. But once we get into the second act and the investigation takes over, it does start to drag, especially as Helle is questioning each person individually. The conversations there I didn't find very inspiring. I found them to be a bit of a drag, unfortunately, and that was a real shame. But then things pick up again in the third act as revelations start to come to light, as fingers are being pointed, and because this is not a structured, rigid investigation, they're not at a police station, this is not an official crime scene, these are just people in a house. They're free to kind of point their fingers as they like and get at each other's throats and twist the narrative as they feel like. Every person in here has agency and is in control. And that makes it really exciting, especially as we ramp up in the third act. But the second act did feel like a lull to me, unfortunately. And I also want to say here that I didn't guess whodunit. I did not have a clue where the book was going. And without spoiling anything at all, I think that that is a good and a bad thing. I'm not saying that I should have been able to guess it, but I am saying that when comparing this book to the works of Agatha Christie, Christie always made sure that you, the reader, had the power and the knowledge and all the tools at your disposal to guess who done it before the sleuth does, before Poirot does, or whoever it is. And I have on multiple occasions. My two favourite Agatha Christie books are Crooked House and Five Little Pigs, and I guessed the killer in both of them. That's not why they're my favourites, but I did guess it right, and I felt really proud of myself, because her books are novels, but they also feel like games. They feel like puzzles. This, not only did I not get it, but I didn't feel very incentivized to try, because all the way through the novel, every bit of information you're given, every bit of dialogue shared, it all just bounces around from person to person. Maybe he did it, maybe she did it, here's his motive, yeah, but here's hers, here's his, and it goes on and on and on, and you get dizzy from it. You have no idea, and you feel kind of dumb and powerless. Once the book ends, however, and the mystery is solved, and the dust settles, you can look back and go, maybe I could have got that. Maybe the clues were there. The twist is very, very satisfying. The setup is great. The situation is great. The callbacks to Golden Age crime, it's all brilliant. And there are moments where this feels like meta fiction. There's a moment where they remark on how fiction is often metatextual and references other fiction, but it itself is fiction doing that. So it feels like metatextual fiction, which is ridiculous. This is the point we're at now with our fiction. All of that is great. I just can't decide if I had all of the tools at my disposal to solve this crime. And I'm not just saying that because I didn't. I'm genuinely wondering if it is possible. And it is. You could guess it, and you could guess it right. But would you have the evidence? Or is that withheld from you? I actually did feel this way when I read Roger Ackroyd. I should really read that one again. I don't know. Not sure. But I know I enjoyed it. Helle Death has all of the trappings of a wonderful, cozy, golden age crime novel. It is a true homage to Agatha Christie, to Honkaku Japanese murder mysteries, and other authors besides who are referenced in this, like Dorothy Sayers. I actually have a friend who lives in Dorothy Sayers' house. That's weird, isn't it? Right now I'm standing here, and I'm listening to my upstairs neighbours stomp around. And I'm racking my brain trying to think if there's anything else I've forgotten, anything else I wanted to mention, but I think I'm good. I don't usually do that. I barrel through, I talk, and then I turn off the camera. This time I'm like, was there something else? I think I'm good. Helle Death is a lot of fun. Fans of Golden Age crime fiction are going to lap this one up, and you're going to enjoy it. So check it out. It's absolutely worth the ride. Now it's time for my Patreon book recommendation of the week. This recommendation comes from Kelly McFarlane, and it is The Salt Path by Raina Wynn. This is a book that I have meant to read for a while now, so let's see what it's about. The Salt Path is a book I find myself recommending again and again. It's an autobiographical snapshot of a really bleak time in a couple's story. I can't really summarize it better than Waterstones does. Just days after Rhaena learns that Moth, her husband of 32 years, is terminally ill, their home and livelihood is taken away. With nothing left and little time, they make the brave and impulsive decision to walk the 630 miles of the sea-swept southwest coast path from Somerset to Dorset via Devon and Cornwall. Wow, that's it, that's the setup, that sounds wonderful. One of those introspective kinds of stories. I think it's time to check that out, at last. Thank you, Kelly. I'll check that out. You check out Helle Death. Support me on Patreon if you also want to recommend me good books, and subscribe for books.